Hello, and welcome to today's Training Industry Leader Talk, Building the Skills AI Can't Replace. I am so excited. I'd like to say thank you to all of our sponsors today, Allego, Corporate Visions, InfoPro Learning, Hemsley Fraser, and SIY Global. I'm Amanda, VP of Brand Strategy here at Training Industry, and I'm thrilled to have you here with us today. Of course, before we get started, some housekeeping items to help you interact with us throughout today's program. Of course, you can chat in the chat panel, share any sort of comments. If you have questions specifically for today's speaker, please open up the Q&A panel and post your questions in that panel so I can address them at the end of our program during our official Q&A section. Once our session ends, you'll notice a new tab pops up in your browser with a feedback survey. Come on, you know how important these feedback surveys are. Just give it a few minutes. Let us know what you thought about today's session, speaker, or topics you'd like to see us cover here in the future. All of our leader talks are recorded and archived on trainingindustry.com, and you will receive a follow-up email with links to the on-demand sessions. Now, if you've previously attended one of our events, it is a pleasure to have you again with us today. If this is your first Training Industry event, a very big welcome to you. At Training Industry, we are dedicated to making the right connections that advance the business of learning. As part of that mission, we provide resources to support your role in L&D, like today's virtual event, articles on our website, our magazine, conferences, research reports, our podcast. We do it all. And if it's about L&D, we definitely are the people you want to be listening to. We would love to connect with you as well. Join us on your favorite social media platforms and let's continue that conversation. Now, I'm very excited about our session 2 for today's Leader Talk, and I'd like to introduce you to Dan Rust, who is the head of InfoPro Learning's Leadership and Organizational Development Practice. He has more than 30 years of experience helping organizational leaders navigate what is often the truest test of their leadership capabilities, leading others through the most challenging and uncertain times. I am super psyched for this program. So Dan, let's let you take it away.
That sounds excellent, Amanda. Just to let everyone know, I do have the Q&A screen open and I do have the chat screen open. And Amanda's going to help me stay on task and stay responsive to both screens. Just fair warning, I do tend to get very engaged in the content and then forget to read the chats, but I'll make every effort to do so today. So welcome to Leading Through the Engagement Crisis. I'm assuming you can see my screen. Can I check that with you, Amanda, just to make sure everyone's
We
able to
see
see
it.
the screen? Okay, perfect. So let's start with me. I'm Dan Rust. As Amanda said, VP of Global Leadership Development for InfoPro Learning. But a couple other aspects of my background I think are relevant to today. So I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about me, but there are a couple things I do want to share with you. A few years ago, HarperCollins published my first book, Workplace Poker. And the essence of Workplace Poker is it's a book about navigating interpersonal dynamics in the workplace. Hence the tagline, are you playing the game or just getting played? And that book opened up a door I didn't expect it to open because I included my social media contact information. I started receiving regularly, and still to this day, once or twice a week, receiving communications from readers of the book who want to share their particular workplace scenario, situation, something that's happened, and they're looking for guidance, feedback, advice. I hate to date myself, but sort of a Dear Abby for the workplace. And it wasn't an expectation, but it happened. And so as I've been responsive to those, I've gotten my finger on the pulse of what's happening in the modern workplace for a lot of people over the last 9 years. And that is part of what informs our session today. Now, the downside is because, of course, what people want to share, the problems that they want solved, are the issues, are the challenges Rarely does somebody contact me to say, "Hey, I just want to let you know everything's fantastic. I had a great day, and every day is a great day." It's usually the other side. So I can be, because I'm exposed to so many of the, I'll call them the dark sides of the workplace. I can be sometimes a bit cynical. Um, I can lean into that. And yet I think it gives me an insight into what is happening in the real workplace. I also am host of the Leadership Disrupted podcast, in which once a week we interview leaders, leadership thinkers across the globe, and we talk about what's happening in the leadership space. And the reason for the title is because I do see that, particularly post-pandemic, the model for leadership, the ideal approach to leadership has definitely shifted and been disrupted in the last few years. And then finally, I also host the Job Smack podcast, which is a podcast where we take letters and communications, we take problems from individual readers who submit their situations, and we do problem solving. Hey, this happened to me in the workplace. What do you suggest? And then we talk about their workplace scenarios. And I share all of that again because it does definitely inform today's session. Because we're going to be talking about how do you boost engagement? How do you drive employee engagement in today's world? Last thing about me is if you want to connect on social media, whether it's LinkedIn, Instagram, almost any X, Twitter, Blue Sky, you name it, my handle is the same. You might only get a little confused on Facebook if you try to connect because there is another Dan Rust in the world, surprisingly, and he's an insurance salesman in Montana. So if you enter something in Facebook and you see an insurance salesman in Montana, nice guy, fantastic guy, just not me. But you'll find it very easy to find me on social media. So let's start with the problem statement, with my thesis. And I have been tracking employee engagement metrics for 22 years. When I say tracking metrics, I've been running my own surveys globally to upwards of 70, 80,000 respondents on average per year. I've been looking at the results of other surveys, including Gallup, Glint, and Gartner, and others. And when I map all of the responses out, and I'm in particular paying attention to confidential surveys, surveys where the employer has no ability to check out IP addresses, has no ability, even if they wanted to determine who the respondents might be. This screen that you see here tracks just four of the metrics that we're monitoring. And I have to tell you, and I don't think this will be a big surprise to any of you, the metrics related to employee uncertainty and cynicism over the last 20 years, 22 years, with a few exceptions, have been moving up and up and up and up. More uncertainty, more cynicism, more doubt, not only about their business, their employer, their workplace. In many cases, it's doubt about the broader world around the world of their employment. And the metrics related to perceptions of leader engagement and perceptions of leader ethics have gone down and down and down. So we live in a world where employees, broadly speaking, I know there are exceptions. I absolutely know there are exceptions. But today, we're going to talk about the employees who are not the exceptions, the employees who are in fact lost. And I like to call this session Leading the Lost because we're losing them or we have lost them. They may still be showing up. They may still be checking in, showing up on time, sitting in their cubicle, putting on a smile, even doing good work, even being productive. Some of the lost employees may be at the top end of your most productive employees, but when you have a chance to speak with them confidentially, when you have a chance to speak with them outside of the context of their current leader or employer, being aware, it is amazing how much doubt and uncertainty and cynicism resides within our employees. Now they realize, hey, I've got to go to work. I've got to do a good job. I need to put food on the table. I need to make this work for me. I need to make this work for me and my family. I get that. And so you may end up being surprised by some of the data that I share with you if you are under the impression that, well, you know what, it's not really not that bad. I mean, yeah, yes, we want to boost employee engagement. So we're going to take a look at our rewards and recognition program, or we want to boost employee engagement. So let's do a few things around the surface. My goal today is to help you see that it's not just a surfacey little issue. It's a deep issue. And if it's not feeling like a deep issue to you yet, it's going to be soon. And so there are a number of factors contributing to the depth of this issue, more so than ever before. And I am a person of a certain age where I can reference back to the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, as well as the early 2000s. And I can tell you over the years, the amount of noise that our employees are experiencing, not just in the workplace, but beyond the workplace, is overwhelming. Most of our employees, without even realizing it, are today experiencing cognitive overload because they're exposed to so much social media, so much news media, so much entertainment media, and sometimes they can't know which is which. What appears to be entertainment is actually commercial media. What appears to be commercial media is actually social media. But we're just overwhelmed with exposure to information again and again and again. And it doesn't end with this, but this is a factor that does impact employee attitudes in the workplace. What's also true is the pace and the complexity of work. Those of you on the chat, those of you who are here right now, if you can remember back, if you are of an age where you can remember back to the 80s and 90s or even the 70s, you may remember that even in the 80s, we were saying, oh man, the pace of work is so fast. Things are getting so much more complicated because, oh, now we have this new thing called email. Oh, now we have this new thing called mobile phones. Uh, Phase upon phase upon phase, the pace of work has been getting faster and faster and faster and more complex. And then we wonder why onboarding can be so challenging today because you have employees who are coming out of school, they're coming out of what felt to them like a fast-paced environment, but suddenly now they're thrust into a very, very complex and fast-paced environment, learning new software, learning new tools, learning new policies and procedures. It's all faster and more complicated. And then we have AI. The entire premise of today's complete session from the training industry is what are the human skills that are critical in an AI-driven world. But AI itself is driving so many behaviors amongst our employees. It's driving concern, it's driving worry, it's driving career changes. If you're like me, you have people in your life whose career paths have already been co-opted in one way or another by AI. And it's not as if you can opt out. You can be the most worried and cynical and even anti-AI person in the workplace, and yet you still can't opt out. It would be like going back to the 80s. If you were an anti-email person or an anti-mobile phone person, okay, that's fine. You can be anti-mobile phone, but you can't opt out because this is a tool everybody is using. It's making everybody more competitive. But AI is impacting employee attitudes, employee demeanors, employee engagement in the workplace. And then as well as the culture within the workplace, let's talk for just a moment about the culture outside of the culture in the broader world, particularly for your younger employees. It feels to many of them, not all, because some of them are doing just fine. Some of them actually, as far as they're concerned, the system works just fine. The school they went to was fantastic. The degree that they got has helped to get them a foot in the door. So you have a percentage of employees whose career paths are absolutely on track, but you also have a percentage of employees, an increasingly large percentage of employees who look at the world and the world feels broken to them. It feels broken in terms of our institutions. It feels broken in terms of policies, in terms of the way things work. It feels like if you're in the clique, if you are amongst the winners, if you are on the inside, it's working great for you. If you are not on the inside, it's not working great for you. And again, that's an increasing percentage of employees. And they may not express this in the workplace. They may not come to you and say, "Oh man, ain't this awful or ain't this frustrating?" But you have to, well, you don't have to. I'm going to suggest that you should acknowledge that for many of our employees, the world outside of our business world is not a great world for them. The system doesn't work as far as they're concerned. I grew up in a time where I still believed the system worked. I believed if I put my nose to the grindstone, how many times did people tell me, "Hey, look, you do your part. You get the right education, you work hard, keep your head down and just do the work. Just do the work and your time will come. Just do the work and your time will come." You know that's not true anymore. I mean, I'm not saying people shouldn't do the work, but for many of us, the system doesn't work. And so then what does that create? It's creating, whether it's a reality or a perception, and maybe it's a bit of both, it's creating this perception of winners and not winners. It's creating a perception of I worked for a healthcare company, healthcare insurance company, big multi-billion-dollar business, and the senior leaders of that company had a parking area at the bottom of the huge parking ramp. There was like a 4-story parking ramp. And every day, employees would drive up into the parking ramp, they would park, and then they would walk down the stairs and then walk out of the parking ramp. And every single one of them passed by an area that had 8 cars. And those 8 cars were always completely polished and washed. They were all, luxury level cars. And so it was unintentional. The leaders hadn't really thought through what they were doing. But what they were doing every day is reminding their employees for this healthcare company where we were supposed to be working for the betterment of man, the betterment of humanity, the betterment of people's health. You walk by and you see, oh, those are the winners. Those people are making out in a way that I may not ever be able to work out. And I, I'm not, and well, I can't say I'm not envious. Yes, of course. I would love to drive a Bugatti. I would love to have, what's the Mercedes, the Mercedes G-Wagon. I would love to have one of those. Yes, so I can't pretend to not be envious. But the point is, there's this perception of winners and losers, and that's just one of the factors that is impacting the way the mindset of our employees coming into the workplace. And don't worry if you're starting to feel like really depressed. I got a few more of these, and then we'll get into solutions. We'll get into what you as a leader can do. But I do think we have to embrace the brutal reality. I think we have to acknowledge what is happening with our employees. And so the remote work shift, accelerated during the pandemic, and then after the pandemic, you've had, many people have to come back or choose to come back to the office environment, but there are still a large percentage of workers who are working remotely, who are engaged remotely, or they may be working in the office, but they're working with colleagues who are engaged remotely. And that remote mindset, again, is impacting the level of engagement for some of our employees. What we know is that your remote employees can be just as engaged as your in-office employees, but it requires a certain level of intentional leadership, intentional engagement with them. You have to put in a little more energy to draw them in as opposed to just, wandering the halls or wandering by their cubicles. So remote work is in fact, I'm looking at the chats and I'm not sure that I'm keeping up with the chats, and I apologize for that. But an additional factor beyond remote work is the level of cultural diversity in our workplace. There was a time when our workplace was pretty homogenous, but now today, driven both by remote work, by globalized work, by what's happening in our society overall, we work with people who are broadly diverse in not only in their culture. But we have more neurodiversity in the workplace. We have more family diversity, more background diversity, more economic diversity. It's a more complicated set of humans and human diversity um, that is impacting culture in the workplace. And then two factors you might not be thinking about, though, are our food system, not just in the US, but globally. If you look at the way we are feeding our employees, and you wonder why do a certain percentage of them seem to just come in not as energetic as they were in in the past, not as engaged. Our food system is not designed to build, high energy employees. Now, again, I understand people make their choices. So this isn't all, about um, humans being, the victim of the food system, but our food system does not make it easy. And then we have our medical establishment. I read a survey, no, I read a research report a couple of weeks ago, and three-quarters of Americans, now that report was based on the US, three-quarters of Americans are under some kind of medication. If you look at the younger generations, 30% of the younger generations are on some kind of emotional support medication for whether it's for anxiety, whether it's for depression, whether it's for ADHD. So we have a workforce that isn't eating great always, and I know there are exceptions, that is more medicated than ever before. And you have to imagine that if you have this situation, all of these things that I described, and now you want to talk about employee engagement, and you ask yourself, well, why aren't they more engaged? Why is the trend consistently down, 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 down? It's not an easy challenge. It's not an easy problem. Now, we have some very specific solutions we're going to share with you now, but it's not it's a multifaceted problem. And then we have the issue of fake news. You know, it, fake news, fake videos, fake information. There is so much fake information in the bloodstream now that when you successfully remove the concept of fact, remove the concept of truth, when people don't know what to count on, what to depend on, then even it makes it more challenging for every leader. So all of these issues that I've been describing create both a work culture and a culture outside of the work culture where I'm surprised that employees are as engaged as they are today. And of course, as leaders, we want to drive and we want to boost employee engagement. Although sometimes we find that leaders are somewhat separated from a lot of these things happening. I had a leader just last week who was shocked because she had gone to Glassdoor and she started to read some Glassdoor reviews related to her company. And she had been an employee, a leader within that company for over a decade, but she just never been prompted to go to Glassdoor. And she was shocked. She was shocked that all of these, what she wanted to call whiners and complainers, were going to Glassdoor. And I found it a bit amusing because she has a certain bubble around her where she tends to view her company and her company culture in a certain way. But when I talk to employees of that organization, I think I have a better finger on the pulse of what's really going on within that organization. Because as employees, when we're dealing directly with our leaders, most of the time we don't feel comfortable being absolutely direct, telling them what's really going on. So leaders do sometimes exist in a bit of a bubble. Now, I'm about to transition into some recommendations for leaders to boost engagement. But before I do that, could you go to the chat function and just chat a word or a brief phrase regarding your reaction to this? And it's totally okay to say that's not my reality. In fact, life is pretty good on my end. That's completely okay. Or the opposite. And just give us a sense of how do you react to what I've just shared at this point? I see we don't allow soda pop in the cafeteria. Um, Thumbs up, spots on, accurate. though I feel supported by my current boss, which is so fantastic. And I would say if you got one of those leaders who sort of swims upstream, like against the tide, or against the current, it behooves all of us to give those leaders positive feedback because they rarely will they say, "Hey, how am I doing in this?" But they need a boost just like the rest of us. And so giving those leaders who are actually like the salmon swimming upstream, giving them a pat on the back, so to speak, metaphorically, um, and depending upon your culture and your environment, giving them a nice friendly hug, no harm at all, as long as it fits the culture. Um, Susan says, I will say that there's a perception that you can't talk frankly to your manager, but I think there would be a lot of surprise that more would not only be open to it, but welcome to it. So I agree with you, Susan. The big challenge is you don't know which is which because yes, more would be more open than we realize, but then every now and then you come against the person who says, well, thanks for sharing. I'm not sure that you're really a good fit for this culture because we're looking for something a little different. So thank you for those reactions. We're going to move on to some actual recommendations now. And so to do that, we're going to go from talking about the crisis to actually trying to get some clarity around what can we as leaders do, because there is a way, and you probably can tell this is an AI generated image, as all of these images were. But I asked AI to generate an image that metaphorically represents the current corporate employee landscape and then a brighter future ahead. So this went a little dark for me. I mean, fires and smoke into a bright future. But that's our goal. Is we're going to talk about what can you as leaders do to take us into a brighter future. So good news and bad news. I'm going to assume most of you are leaders in the workplace, or you have easy access to leaders in the workplace over whom you provide training or development services. And all of the really good research tells us that this does start with the mindset of the leaders themselves. And the first thing that leaders do, Susan, when you mentioned, hey, I've got a leader who really is the opposite, is really engaged, is really helping me. Oftentimes, what drives that behavior is they do recognize the reality. They recognize how tough it is. They recognize that they actually have to put in a little bit more than the average leader to try to swim upstream, so to speak. So embracing the brutal reality does not mean you have to accept it. It doesn't mean that you have to get depressed or get angry, but you do have to see it. And in fact, one of the ways we earn trust of employees is when employees recognize that we see what they see. It's very uncomfortable for an employee to have a certain vision of how things are and then to be dealing with a leader who just seems to be nothing but a cheerleader, nothing but happy, happy, happy. No weeds in our garden. Hey, all is well here. So we want to embrace brutal reality because that also causes us, because as humans, we're problem solvers. If you embrace the brutal reality of the situation, you will inherently also start to think through, well, how do I fix this? How do I solve this? What can I as a leader do? I would encourage you to avoid oversimplification. Now, there are a lot of solutions or a lot of ideas for boosting employee engagement they might be simple and not enough, but I don't want to in any way take away from the viability or the validity of making changes to the recognition program or making changes to the workplace environment to bring in more sunshine or more access to fresh water or more access to fresh fruit or more access to whatever. So but I think what we have found as companies have invested billions of dollars over the last 20 years to enhance the work environment, to enhance recognition programs, to make sure that employees know what's expected of them. So they create, clear job descriptions and clear accountabilities, and we're going to use OKRs or KPIs. We're going to make sure that employees know what we expect them to do. Those are all good things, but don't be too shocked if you do all of those things and your overall engagement either stays flat or even continues to diminish. Because again, those are good things, but they're not necessarily enough. I would recommend that as you're approaching this as an issue, that you employ what I call integrated thinking. And what I mean by that is integrating critical thinking with strategic thinking with systems thinking, really putting some deep thought into why are things the way they are in my particular work environment, in my particular world, and then outside of my work environment as well, the culture at work and then the culture outside of the culture. We are awash, as I said earlier, in information, misinformation, disinformation, and just overwhelmed with overinformation that oftentimes we don't have or take the time to think deeply about some of the most important issues. And I personally believe this is, if not the most important, it is among the most important issues in today's work environment, employee engagement, and how do we deeply work to boost employee engagement. And so I like the idea of integrated thinking because it requires you to go and think a little more deeply about issues. And if you think more deeply and give it the time, you are much more likely to come up with deep solutions that will actually make a difference as opposed to just working along the surface. Have empathy for others and accept the validity of multiple viewpoints and perspectives. What I mean by that is recognize that if you are whatever age you might be, but let's imagine you're in your 50s or even 60s, and you've got employees who are in their 20s or 30s. I used to get so frustrated with many of younger employees because they didn't have my work ethic. They didn't have my critical thinking ability. They just didn't seem to be trying as hard as they should be trying. And I had a great coach who helped me understand that the world that I was formed in that world, the system, for the most part, was working pretty well. And I was able to work that system and I was able to progress in that system. And my coach helped me see the world through the eyes of others, see the world through the eyes of somebody who just came out of college and they have mountains of debt and they're being paid at a level where they can barely afford the basics. They can barely afford, even though they're doing good work and they've got a halfway decent job, and but they can barely afford to actually just pay the regular bills every week. Or in other ways, this person helped me see the world through their eyes, not just my own aged eyes. And I would encourage you, because many employees, when you ask them a series of questions about their lack of engagement, they will say it in different ways, but much of it comes down to they don't feel seen, they don't feel known, they don't feel cared about. They feel like, you know what? If all I do is I achieve my KPIs every month, they leave me alone, and nobody really engages with me as long as I do what they need me to do, as long as I am a cog in the system for them. So, but in order to see them and understand them, it requires a level of engagement with them. And I want to remind you, so I'm sharing a lot of thoughts and opinions, but it is grounded in reality. The one thing, and the reason I'm bringing this back up is when I start to share these thoughts with leaders, this is about the place where they start to give me kind of, yeah, but what about? Yeah, but, and the excuses come up, the reasons come up, and they just start to weasel their way out of really engaging And it's so sad because this is the good stuff. Like where I'm about to share with you in the next 10 minutes. This is the really good. It's hard. This is the hard stuff, but this is the good stuff. This is what employees tell me they want. So we have an employee engagement model. As you know, as I said, I work for InfoPro Learning. InfoPro Learning has an employee engagement training program called Cracking the Engagement Code. The most critical element of boosting employee engagement, you see it at the center, engaged leadership. Many employees, they take their cues from you as the leader to the degree that you are putting in more than the average amount of effort, to the degree that you are bringing joy to the workplace, to the degree that you are reflecting engagement. They're going to take their cue from you, and it is going to drive engagement from them. But engagement from a leader does not look like a leader who tracks KPIs. Sends out Teams messages saying, "Hey, I need to make sure everybody's updated your KPIs for the month," or sends out a lot of emails, but rarely actually engages one-on-one personally. There are, I have a lot of empathy for leaders today because when I was first growing up as a leader in the work world, I remember being told the largest number of direct reports we will give you is 7. You'll have 7 direct reports, never more than that, unless maybe you're onboarding one person or helping with one person, but never more than 7 or 8 because a leader can't really lead more people than that. And over the decades, the comfort zone it's just changed. I know many leaders today who have 12, 15, 20 direct reports. I know one leader who has 32 because one of his peers quit the company. So all of his peers' direct reports came over to him. He's got 32 direct reports. So I have great empathy for leaders who themselves are under a lot of pressure. They're under pressure to be what some people call working leaders. They're basically individual contributors and they're leaders. So we want you to do and actually produce, and we want you to lead these 12 people or these 15 people. I get that pressure. And yet I have to say, the one thing that your people want more than anything else is your time. They want and need your time, and not your time to review the latest project, not your time to review KPIs or OKRs, not your time in business, but your time as a human to say, hey, let's take a little time this week. Tell me how you're doing. Tell me how life is for you. Tell me how the environment is for you. Tell me how I'm showing up for you as a leader. How am I doing as a leader for you? And not as a one-off, not as a, oh yeah, that we had that conversation last year and check that box. I have a great boss, and I'm going to use that term consciously. And she may or may not watch the recording of this webinar. But the great thing about her is we have a weekly one-on-one, and it's brief. It's just 20 minutes because she has a busy schedule. I have a busy schedule. We can barely fit the 20 minutes in, but she never misses that 20 minutes. She prioritizes it, and it's so human. No, it's not, and it's not. It's just good. I have to tell you, it's good. I like her as a human. She likes me as a human. Over time, over the last 5 years, we've grown to know each other as humans. And that really drives my engagement in a work environment that can be very debilitating, that can be very chaotic and sometimes abrasive, a very challenging work environment. Time is what they want from you, what they need from you. How do you show an employee that you see them, that you know them? It's scheduling time with them, spending time with them. And yes, you can get your work done as well, but getting to know them. And I know these are words, and I know it's easy to say and hard to do. Uh, Weekly one-on-ones in many organizations have shifted to bi-weekly one-on-ones or monthly one-on-ones. I would just suggest that you prioritize those, that you don't just continuously cancel them, because as the week gets busier and busier and your schedule fills up, well, it's the easy appointment to miss. It's the easy appointment to squeeze out. It's easy to say, "Hey, I'm not going to be able to make it this week. Let's carry this forward into next week." It's easy to do, but it's also easy to not do. It's easy to decide that one-on-one time is my priority. It is my major leadership priority or job. So I'm going to ask you in the chat function, although we're going to go through this. Actually, I'm not going to do this because we only have about 5 minutes left and I want to get through a couple more quick things. And I'll try to stay focused so that I don't over verbalize on any of these concepts coming up. But I would love for you to think about, when have you invested discretionary time with an employee? Not just had the meeting that you have to have or the meetings that you have to have, but where you've consciously said, I'm going to spend more time with this employee because she needs it, he needs it, or maybe because I need it. Maybe I'm the one who actually needs to be more connected with them. So, my next point, for leaders, there are no small lies. And I'm going to use that term lie. Now, lying can be not telling the full truth, not sharing the full background or information, obfuscating. So you can lie by omission. And we live in an environment where lies are just flooding us every single day. You can, you look at the world around us. We, um, we are flooded with non-truth tellers, and I believe it becomes more important than ever that they count on us for truth, that they can count on us for truth. Now, as a leader, there are sometimes going to be things that you can't share, things that you can't say. And I can't even say that you should never lie, because there are times when you do have to obfuscate the truth, but it should at least be a thoughtful process. That's why I say for leaders, there are no small lies. You can lie and still be ethical. You can lie and still be an honest person. If you're lying with the intent of something positive, something ethical, but I think our culture right now is trending toward lying being the default, lying be the, and so we have so many examples from the broader, governmental examples across the world to senior leadership examples. And so understand, in an environment where your employees are already naturally cynical, you cannot ever assume there are small leadership lies. Every lie has big implications. It's kind of a shame, isn't it, that I even have to, like, why would that even be a point? But it is a point, because when I ask employees how they feel about the trustworthiness of their leaders, if it's in a completely confidential environment where they know nothing will ever come back to haunt them, when it's completely confidential, the truth is they're doubtful. They are uncertain. And I think we're breeding that uncertainty because they see these examples all around them. So you can't say, well, on TikTok it's this way, but in this world it's like this. On YouTube it's this way, but in our world it's like this. All of that world, the outside world does impact your inside world. And I was going to ask if we'd had time for you to share when you've been tempted to obfuscate the truth, but I'm not going to be able to ask that because we are going to be wrapping up. I know, Amanda, you have a few last words that you want to say. So we will be sending out this deck because it has the complete model on it. And I will make sure that the deck has some additional information so that if you really want to dive into any of these, I'll include enough information where you can do a deeper dive with all of them. So just to pay for my supper, I work for Info Pro Learning, fantastic company, love them. They let me do things like this. So thank you so much. And Amanda, it's all yours.
Whew. Dan, thank you so much. You crammed a lot into our 35-ish minutes here. I really appreciate you being here. It was a hot conversation going on in the chat, so thanks to all of you for participating. Of course, let's see here. We have our next session coming up. We have a break for about 15 minutes, and then we will be with Abby and Rick for their session sponsored by Helmsley Fraser, What Human Capabilities Matter Most in an AI World. So we will see you then. Hope you stick around. And we've got a few more great hours with you today. Thanks, everyone. Thanks again, Dan.
Thank you.